The bitter December wind howled through the snow-covered plains of Nebraska Territory as Winifred Hamilton clutched her threadbare coat tightly around her shivering frame. The stagecoach that had abandoned her at the crossroads, 3 miles outside St. Joe, had long disappeared into the white curtain of falling snow, leaving nothing but wheel tracks that were rapidly filling in. Tears froze against her cheeks as reality sank in the man who had promised to meet her. Her would-be husband, through a mail-order arrangement, was nowhere to be found. "Please," she whispered to the empty landscape, her voice immediately swallowed by the whistling wind. "Please, someone." The blizzard had grown fiercer since she'd been left standing at the crossroads, and with each passing minute, the 22-year-old Boston native felt her hope diminishing along with the feeling in her toes. The year was 1869, and Winifred had traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, a cattle rancher who had written such beautiful letters describing the life they would build together. Now, as the snow piled around her ankles, she wondered if she would die before ever seeing his face. In the distance, a dark shape emerged from the whiteness. At first, Winifred thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but as the shape grew larger, she could make out the silhouette of a horse and rider pushing against the storm. Her heart leaped with renewed hope. "Hello," she called out, waving her arms frantically. "Help! Please help me!" The rider changed course, heading toward her. As he drew closer, Winifred could see he was a tall man on a sturdy chestnut stallion. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat crusted with snow, and a thick scarf covered his mouth and nose. "Madam," he called, his voice carrying through the storm, "what in God's name are you doing out here?" I was supposed to meet someone," Winifred stammered, her teeth chattering violently. "But he never came." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. He unwrapped his heavy woolen coat without hesitation and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it, still carrying his body heat, felt like salvation itself. "You're near frozen through," he said, concern etching his features as he pulled the coat tightly around her. "I'm Gabriel Garrett. My ranch is about a mile from here. Let's get you somewhere warm before you lose those fingers." Before she could respond, Gabriel lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness for a man with such calloused hands. He mounted behind her, one arm securing her against his chest while the other held the reins. Winifred felt herself leaning into his solid warmth, too exhausted and cold to maintain any sense of propriety. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "Hold tight, madam. Samson here knows the way home even in this weather." As they rode through the blinding snow, Winifred fought to stay conscious. The rhythmic motion of the horse beneath them and the steady heartbeat of the stranger at her back lulled her toward a dangerous sleep. Gabriel seemed to sense this and kept talking, his deep voice rumbling against her back. "What's your name, miss? I need you to stay awake now." "Winifred." "Winifred Hamilton," she replied, forcing her eyes open. "I came from Boston to marry a man named Jonathan Preston." Gabriel's body tensed slightly against hers. "Preston, from the South Valley?" "Yes, that's him. Do you know where I might find him?" There was a pause before Gabriel answered, his voice carefully measured. "We'll sort all that out once we get you warm. Preston's situation has changed recently." Before Winifred could question him further, the silhouette of a modest but sturdy ranch house appeared through the curtain of snow. A barn stood nearby, and the faint glow of lantern light offered the promise of warmth and safety. "Here we are," Gabriel announced, guiding his horse toward the barn. "My home isn't much, but it's solid and warm." Once inside the barn, Gabriel dismounted first, then gently helped Winifred down. Her legs buckled beneath her, numb from cold and disuse. "I can't feel my feet," she admitted, embarrassed by her weakness. Without a word, Gabriel swept her into his arms and carried her from the barn toward the house. Winifred wanted to protest a proper lady, would never allow such familiarity, but survival trumped decorum in that moment. The interior of the ranch house was simple but welcoming. A fire roared in the stone hearth, and the main room was filled with handcrafted wooden furniture. Gabriel set her down in an armchair close to the fire and immediately began removing her snow-soaked boots. "These need to come off," he explained, working quickly but gently. "Your feet are dangerously cold." Winifred gasped as he removed her stockings, exposing her pale, nearly blue feet to the fire's warmth. The sensation of blood returning to her extremities was agonizing. "It hurts," she whimpered, clutching the arms of the chair. "I know," Gabriel said, his hazel eyes meeting hers with unexpected softness. "That's good means there's no permanent damage. The pain means you're warming up." He moved about the cabin efficiently, putting water on to boil and retrieving blankets from a chest. Winifred took the opportunity to study her rescuer more clearly. Gabriel Garrett appeared to be in his early 30s, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh prairie sun. His jawline was strong, framed by a short beard that didn't quite hide a small scar near his chin. Despite his rugged appearance, there was a gentleness to his movements that contradicted the calloused hands and broad shoulders of a working cowboy. "Mr. Garrett," she began, "you mentioned that Mr. Preston's situation has changed. What did you mean by that?" Gabriel paused in the middle of pouring hot water into a mug. His shoulders stiffened slightly before he turned to face her. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, Miss Hamilton, but Jonathan Preston passed away 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quickly." The words hit Winifred like a physical blow. She had traveled so far, pinned all her hopes on a future that had disappeared before she'd even arrived. "But his last letter was dated just a month ago," she whispered, more to herself than to Gabriel. "He fell ill shortly after, from what I understand," Gabriel explained, offering her the steaming mug of tea. "Not many knew about his arrangement with you. I only know because he mentioned it to Doc Willis when he realized he wasn't getting better." Winifred accepted the tea, grateful for something to occupy her trembling hands. "So I've come all this way for nothing," she said, her voice hollow. "I have no funds to return to Boston, and even if I did, there's nothing for me there." Gabriel knelt beside her chair, his expression serious. "Miss Hamilton, you've had a terrible shock on top of nearly freezing to death. Let's focus on getting you warm and rested. Tomorrow is soon enough to figure out what comes next." The practical kindness in his voice brought tears to Winifred's eyes. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak further. "I'll prepare a room for you," Gabriel said, rising to his feet. "I have a spare bedroom my sister uses when she visits from St. Joe." "Your sister?" "Yes, Harriet. She's married to the blacksmith in town. They have 2 little ones now." The mention of family made Winifred's chest ache with loneliness. She had no family left in Boston. Her parents had died of influenza 2 years prior, leaving her with mounting debts and few prospects. The mail order arrangement had been her last hope for a decent life. Gabriel disappeared into the back of the house and returned with a nightgown and robe. "These were Harriet's. She left them last time she was here. They might be a bit large on you, but they're clean and dry." Winifred accepted them gratefully. "You're very kind, Mr. Garrett." "Just Gabriel, please, and it's no trouble. No one should be left out in a storm like that." He showed her to a small but neat bedroom and left her to change. The nightgown was indeed too large, but Winifred was beyond caring about such details. She changed quickly, eager to escape her damp clothing, and climbed beneath the thick quilt on the narrow bed. Despite her exhaustion and the comfort of the bed, sleep eluded her as her mind raced with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. A soft knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Miss Hamilton, I've brought some broth if you're feeling up to it," Gabriel called softly. "Please, come in," she responded, sitting up and wrapping the quilt around her shoulders. Gabriel entered carrying a tray with a bowl of steaming broth and more tea. He set it carefully on her lap, then pulled a chair from the corner to sit near the bed. "It's not fancy, but it's hot and nourishing," he said, watching as she took a tentative sip. The broth was simple but flavorful, with chunks of vegetables and beef. Winifred hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first taste hit her tongue. "It's wonderful," she assured him between spoonfuls. "Thank you." Gabriel nodded, seeming content to sit in companionable silence while she ate. When she'd finished, he took the tray and stood to leave. "Mr. Gabriel," Winifred corrected herself. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me today. I'm deeply grateful." A hint of a smile crossed his face, softening his features. "Get some rest, Miss Hamilton. We can talk more in the morning." After he left, Winifred lay back against the pillows, listening to the howl of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. Despite the tragedy that had brought her here and the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt strangely safe in this stranger's home. Morning brought a temporary reprieve from the storm. Winifred woke to sunlight streaming through a small window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, she was disoriented, the events of the previous day rushing back in a flood of memory. The smell of coffee and something baking drew her from the bed. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which someone, presumably Gabriel, had hung near the stove to dry overnight. They smelled faintly of wood smoke, but were mercifully dry and warm. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Gabriel at the stove, his back to her as he tended to what appeared to be biscuits. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, a look of relief crossing his face. "Good morning," he said. "I was beginning to worry you might sleep the day away." "What time is it?" Winifred asked, embarrassed at the thought of imposing on his hospitality for so long. "Just past 10, Gabriel replied, gesturing to a chair at the small wooden table. "Sit, please." "Coffee's fresh, and these biscuits are nearly done." Winifred sat, watching as he moved confidently around the kitchen. For a bachelor, Gabriel Garrett seemed surprisingly domestic. "Did you learn to cook from your mother?" she asked, accepting a cup of strong black coffee. A shadow passed over Gabriel's features. "No, my mother passed when I was young. Army taught me. Served with the Union during the war, and afterward, a man either learns to feed himself or goes hungry." "I'm sorry about your mother," Winifred said softly, "and thank you for your service." "My brother fought for the Union as well. He didn't come home." Gabriel nodded solemnly. "Many good men didn't." He placed a plate of golden biscuits on the table along with a jar of honey. "Eat up. We need to talk about your situation, and it's better to do that on a full stomach." Winifred's appetite faltered at the reminder of her predicament, but she obediently spread honey on a biscuit and took a bite. It was surprisingly light and flavorful. "These are delicious," she said with genuine appreciation. Gabriel's expression warmed slightly. "Thank you. Now, about your situation. The stage won't be back through for another 3 days, and even then, the weather might delay it further." "I understand," Winifred replied, setting down her biscuit. "But as I mentioned yesterday, I have nowhere to return to. I sold everything I had to purchase my ticket west." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, studying her with a thoughtful expression. "St. Joe is a growing town. There might be work for a woman of your education. How do you know I'm educated? Your speech, your manners." "You're clearly not from farming or working stock." Winifred nodded, impressed by his observation. "My father was a professor at Harvard. He ensured I received an education, though not formally at university, of course." "Can you teach?" "Yes, I tutored several children in Boston." Gabriel nodded, a plan seemingly forming in his mind. The town's been talking about starting a proper school. Until now, most children learn from their parents or share a traveling teacher with neighboring settlements. Someone with your background would be valued. Hope flickered within Winifred for the first time since learning of Jonathan Preston's death. "Do you really think they would hire me, a stranger?" "Folks out here judge by capability more than background," Gabriel said. "Once the weather clears, we can ride into town and speak with Mayor Holloway. He's been the most vocal about needing a school." "That's very kind of you, but I don't wish to impose further on your generosity." Gabriel waved away her concern. "It's no imposition. I need to go into town anyway once the snow lets up." They finished breakfast, discussing practical matters, how long the storm might last. what supplies Gabriel had on hand, the daily routine of the ranch. Winifred insisted on helping with the dishes and other chores, unwilling to be a burden. As they worked side by side washing the breakfast dishes, Winifred found herself stealing glances at her host. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel secure despite the chaos of her circumstances. "You mentioned your sister lives in town," Winifred said, carefully drying a plate. "Do your parents live nearby as well?" Gabriel's hands stilled momentarily in the wash basin. "No, Pa died 5 years ago. He started this ranch after the war. I took over when his heart gave out." "I'm sorry," Winifred said, genuinely moved by the loss evident in his voice. "You must miss them both." Gabriel nodded, resuming his washing. "Every day, but they taught me well. Pa always said a man's worth is measured by how he treats those who can do nothing for him." "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Gabriel agreed. "You'd have liked him. He had no patience for pretense, but he valued education and proper manners, said civilization depended on both." The casual way he spoke, as though it was a given that she would have met his father in some alternative version of their lives, made something flutter in Winifred's chest. She pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself that her current situation was temporary at best. After the dishes were done, Gabriel announced he needed to tend to his livestock. "Storm or no storm, animals need care. You're welcome to rest or explore the house." "Could I?" Winifred hesitated, then forged ahead. "Could I accompany you?" "I grew up in the city, but I'm not afraid of work or animals." Surprise registered on Gabriel's face, quickly replaced by approval. "Of course. Dress warmly though the barn's sheltered but still cold." Bundled in Gabriel's spare coat, which engulfed her smaller frame, Winifred followed him through the snow to the barn. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the earthy smell of hay and animals. 6 horses occupied stalls along one wall, while a small herd of milk cows were gathered in a pen at the far end. "This is quite an operation for one person," Winifred observed, watching as Gabriel expertly forked hay into the horses' mangers. "I have help during busier seasons," he explained. 2 local boys come by for the cattle drives and harvests. Winter's quieter, so I manage alone. Winifred approached a gentle-looking mare who stretched her neck over the stall door inquisitively. "What's her name?" "That's Penny," Gabriel said, pausing in his work. "She's the gentlest of the bunch. You can pet her if you like." Winifred cautiously reached out, smiling when Penny nuzzled her palm eagerly. "She's beautiful." "She's also the best lady's mount I have," Gabriel commented casually. "If you're interested in learning to ride properly while you're here, she'd be perfect." The offer took Winifred by surprise. "You'd teach me to ride?" Gabriel shrugged, returning to his work. "Might be useful if you stay in these parts. Distances are greater out west than back east." "I'd like that," Winifred said, surprising herself with her enthusiasm. In Boston, proper ladies rode side saddle in parks, not across open prairie astride a horse. Gabriel showed her how to brush the horses and measure feed, patient with her inexperience but never condescending. He explained each task as they worked, from mucking stalls to checking hooves for stones or injuries. "You're a good teacher," Winifred observed as they finished the morning chores. Gabriel looked momentarily flustered by the compliment. "Just explaining what needs doing," he said with a modest shrug. By the time they returned to the house, the morning had passed pleasantly despite the continued snowfall. Winifred's cheeks were flushed from the cold and exertion, but she felt more alive than she had in months, perhaps years. The next 2 days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Winifred insisted on earning her keep by taking over cooking duties, much to Gabriel's initial protest and eventual appreciation. They worked together on ranch chores during the day, and in the evenings, Gabriel showed Winifred how to play checkers on a handmade board. On the 3rd evening, as they sat before the fire with mugs of hot cider, Gabriel broached a subject they'd been carefully avoiding. "The stage should arrive tomorrow, weather permitting," he said, studying the flames rather than looking at her. I thought we might ride into town if the snow holds off. Winifred felt an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving the ranch and Gabriel. Yes, that would be wise, she agreed, her voice not quite steady. I should speak with the mayor about possible employment. You could stay here, Gabriel said suddenly, the words tumbling out as though he hadn't planned to speak them. Until you find suitable arrangements in town, I mean. Winifred looked up, surprised by the offer. That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, Gabriel interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. The ranch is too quiet with just me. Your company has been welcome. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that their brief acquaintance had grown into something neither had anticipated. Winifred felt her heart quicken, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future here, on this ranch, with this quiet, honorable man. I would like to stay, she admitted softly, at least until I know whether there's work for me in town. Relief visibly washed over Gabriel's features. Good, that's good. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a pristine white landscape that sparkled in the winter sun. After breakfast, Gabriel saddled Penny for Winifred and his own stallion, Samson, for their ride into town. It's about 5 miles to St. Joe, he explained, adjusting Penny's stirrups to accommodate Winifred's height. The road should be passable enough, even with the snow. Winifred had never ridden astride before, and despite Gabriel's brief lessons in the barn, she felt awkward and unbalanced as they set out. Gabriel rode patiently beside her, offering gentle corrections to her posture and handling of the reins. Relax your shoulders, he advised. Penny knows what she's doing. Trust her to follow the path. By the time St. Joe appeared on the horizon, Winifred had found her rhythm and was beginning to enjoy the freedom of riding properly. The town itself was larger than she'd expected a proper main street lined with businesses, including a general store, blacksmith, saloon, and what appeared to be a small hotel. People nodded respectfully to Gabriel as they rode down the main street, curious glances directed at Winifred. Gabriel guided them to a modest building with mayor's office painted on a wooden sign above the door. Mayor Holloway should be in, Gabriel said, dismounting and helping Winifred down from Penny. He keeps regular hours, even when there's little official business. The mayor turned out to be a jovial man in his 50s with a magnificent mustache and an enthusiastic handshake. He listened intently as Gabriel explained Winifred's situation, his expression growing increasingly interested when Gabriel mentioned her educational background. A professor's daughter, you say? Mayor Holloway turned his attention fully to Winifred. And you've experienced teaching children? Yes, sir, Winifred confirmed. I tutored children in mathematics, literature, history, and basic sciences in Boston. The town council approved funds for a schoolteacher 3 months ago, the mayor explained, rubbing his hands together. We've been waiting for a suitable candidate. Most educated folks passing through are headed for California or Oregon, not looking to settle in Nebraska Territory. Hope blossomed in Winifred's chest. Are you suggesting there might be a position for me? More than suggesting, young lady. I'm offering it to you directly, Mayor Holloway declared. Salary is $40 a month plus a small cabin behind the church. It's modest but clean, with a stove and basic furnishings. The offer was more generous than Winifred had dared hope. That's very kind, Mr. Mayor, but shouldn't there be some sort of interview or examination of my qualifications? The mayor chuckled. Miss Hamilton, you speak like an educated woman, and Gabriel Garrett vouches for your character. That's recommendation enough for me. The children need teaching and you need employment. It's a simple arrangement that benefits us both. Winifred glanced at Gabriel, who gave her an encouraging nod. In that case, Mr. Mayor, I would be honored to accept the position. Excellent. Mayor Holloway clapped his hands together. School term would normally have started in September, but we can begin after the new year. That gives you a few weeks to settle in and prepare." As they left the mayor's office, Winifred felt light-headed with relief and excitement. "I can hardly believe it," she said as Gabriel helped her mount Penny. "To come so far expecting one life and find another entirely." Gabriel's expression was unreadable as he swung up onto Samson. "Would you like to see your cabin before we head back to the ranch?" The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a curtained-off sleeping area, but it was solid and clean, with a decent cook stove and a small writing desk by the window. It stood about 50 yards behind the white clapboard church, offering a view of both the town's main street and the rolling prairie beyond. "What do you think?" Gabriel asked, watching as Winifred explored the space. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "Small, but all I need." Gabriel nodded, a strange reluctance in his movements as he prepared to leave. "Mayor Holloway said it would be ready by next week. I'm happy to help you move in when the time comes." "Thank you," Winifred said, suddenly shy, "for everything." The ride back to the ranch was quieter, both lost in their own thoughts about the changes that had occurred in such a short time. As they approached Gabriel's property, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow, turning everything golden and ethereal. "It's beautiful here," Winifred observed, reining Penny to a stop to admire the view of the ranch house nestled against a backdrop of distant hills. "So different from Boston." "Do you miss it?" Gabriel asked, bringing Samson alongside her. "The city, I mean." Winifred considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the theaters, but I was never truly happy there, especially after my parents died. I was existing, not living." Gabriel studied her face, his expression softening. "And now I feel." "Possibilities," she said simply. "As though life is opening before me rather than closing in." Something shifted in Gabriel's eyes, a decision made or a barrier lowered. "Winifred," he began, using her first name for the first time. "I know we've only known each other a few days, but I've come to—" He was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching rapidly. Both turned to see a rider coming fast down the road, waving his hat urgently. "That's Jim Patterson," Gabriel said, immediately alert. "Something's wrong." They rode to meet the newcomer, who reined his lathered horse to a stop before them. "Gabriel, thank God I found you," the man panted. "Fire at the Wilson place. Everyone's gathering to help." Without hesitation, Gabriel nodded. "I'll come right away." "Miss Hamilton, I need to go," Winifred urged. "I can find my way back to the ranch." Gabriel looked torn for a moment, then made a swift decision. "No, come with us. The Wilson children will need minding while the adults fight the fire." "They're just beyond the ridge. They're not far." The next hours were a blur of activity. The Wilson farmhouse was partially engulfed in flames when they arrived, with neighbors already forming a bucket brigade from the well to the house. Gabriel immediately joined the men fighting the blaze, while Winifred found Mrs. Wilson clutching her 3 terrified children near the barn. "Oh, thank heavens," Mrs. Wilson cried when Winifred introduced herself and offered help. "Could you take the little ones to the barn? It's safer there, and I need to help save what we can from the house." Winifred spent the evening in the barn with the Wilson children: Emma, age 7, Thomas, age 5, and baby Lucy, just 18 months old. She distracted them with stories and simple games, keeping them calm despite the chaos outside. Occasionally, she would step to the barn door to check progress, her heart clenching whenever she caught sight of Gabriel's tall form silhouetted against the flames. It was past midnight when the fire was finally extinguished. The east wing of the farmhouse was destroyed, but the main structure had been saved. Exhausted, soot-covered neighbors gathered in the yard to assess the damage and offer support to the shaken Wilson family. Gabriel found Winifred in the barn, where all 3 Wilson children had finally fallen asleep on a makeshift bed of hay and blankets. "You're a natural with them," he observed quietly, his face streaked with soot and sweat. "They're sweet children," Winifred replied, gently stroking Emma's hair. "Is everyone all right?" No injuries, thank God, and the house can be rebuilt. Gabriel's voice was hoarse from smoke, but his eyes shone with admiration as he looked at her. Most city women would have been hysterical in a situation like this. Winifred smiled wryly. Perhaps I'm not most city women. No, Gabriel agreed softly. You most certainly are not. The ride back to the ranch in the pre-dawn hours was silent, both too exhausted for conversation. When they finally arrived, Gabriel insisted Winifred take his bed while he slept on a pallet by the fire. You've earned a proper rest, he said firmly when she protested. We can sort out everything else tomorrow. Winifred was too tired to argue. She fell asleep almost instantly in Gabriel's bed, surrounded by the comforting scent of him on the pillows. She woke late the next morning to find Gabriel already up and about, fresh coffee brewing on the stove. He looked up when she emerged from the bedroom, a soft smile warming his features. Good morning, he greeted her. Or afternoon, nearly. You slept long and well, I hope. Better than I expected after such excitement, Winifred admitted, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. How are the Wilsons? Neighbors are already organizing to rebuild the damaged section, Gabriel reported. The community takes care of its own out here. Winifred nodded thoughtfully. I noticed. It's different from the city, where neighbors might not even know each other's names. They settled into a comfortable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the winter sunlight stream through the windows. Gabriel seemed on the verge of speaking several times, but would then appear to think better of it. Finally, Winifred broke the silence. You were about to say something yesterday, before we learned about the fire. Something about even though we've only known each other a short time. Gabriel's eyes widened slightly, surprised that she remembered. He set his coffee cup down carefully and cleared his throat. I was, he admitted. It seems foolish now in the light of day. I don't think it was foolish, Winifred said softly, her heart pounding. Please, tell me what you were going to say. Gabriel met her gaze, his expression vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. I was going to say that I've come to care for you, Winifred, more than I thought possible in such a short time. The thought of you living alone in town when you could stay here. He paused, gathering his courage. I know it's too soon to speak of such things, but I want you to know that there would be a place for you here if you wanted it. Winifred's breath caught in her throat. Gabriel, are you asking not marriage? He hastened to clarify, though a blush crept up his neck. Not yet. That would be presumptuous, but perhaps a courtship, to see if what I feel, what I hope you might also feel, could grow into something more. The directness of his words, free from flowery sentiments or exaggerated promises, touched Winifred deeply. This was a man who spoke truth, who offered what he could with honesty and respect. I would like that very much, she replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. I've felt drawn to you since that first day. I thought perhaps it was just gratitude, but it's more than that. Relief and joy transformed Gabriel's face. Then you'll stay, at least until we know for certain. I'll stay, Winifred agreed, smiling. I'll still teach at the school. I gave my word to Mayor Holloway, but I could live here and ride to town each day. I'd like that, Gabriel said, reaching across the table to take her hand in his. His touch was warm and solid, like the man himself. We can take our time, get to know each other properly. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Winifred's life. True to their agreement, they proceeded with a proper courtship. Gabriel was respectful of her boundaries, never presuming more intimacy than was appropriate, yet their connection deepened with each passing day. They worked side by side on the ranch, shared meals and conversations by the fire, and gradually revealed their histories to one another. Winifred learned that Gabriel had fought at Gettysburg and Antietam, experiences he rarely spoke of, except in the quietest moments when the barriers between them seemed thinnest. He told her of his father's dream to build something lasting in the West, away from the bitter divisions that had torn the country apart. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her father's academic pursuits, and her mother's gentle guidance. January brought the start of school in St. Joe. Winifred rode Penny into town each morning, where 15 children ranging from 6 to 14 years old awaited her instruction. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. Many of the children had received only sporadic education before, and their eagerness to learn fueled Winifred's determination to serve them well. Gabriel often rode with her into town, using the opportunity to conduct his own business before meeting her at the end of the school day for the ride home. The townsfolk quickly grew accustomed to seeing them together, and rumors of their courtship spread with predictable speed. Mrs. Holloway asked when the wedding would be. Winifred reported with amusement one evening as they sat before the fire. February had brought even colder temperatures, making the cozy ranch house all the more inviting. Gabriel chuckled. "And what did you tell her?" "That we were in no hurry and that some matters are private." "Wise answer," Gabriel approved, "though I admit I've been thinking about it myself." Winifred's heart skipped a beat. "Have you?" "I have," Gabriel confirmed, his expression growing serious. "I know we agreed to take our time, but my feelings have only grown stronger. I find myself looking forward to your return each day, missing you when you're teaching in town." "I feel the same," Winifred admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel rose from his chair and, in a gesture that took her by surprise, knelt before her. "Winifred Hamilton, I know this may still seem fast, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Winifred's eyes, tears of joy and wonder at how drastically her life had changed in just 2 months. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Gabriel, I love you too." The kiss they shared was tender and full of promise their first, despite the weeks of courtship. Gabriel's hands were gentle as they framed her face, and when they broke apart, his smile was radiant with happiness. "When?" he asked simply. "Spring," Winifred decided. "When the land comes alive again. It seems fitting." The next morning, they rode into town together to share their news. Mayor Holloway clapped Gabriel on the back with hearty congratulations, while his wife immediately began planning a proper celebration. "The whole town will want to attend," Mrs. Holloway insisted. "The schoolteacher and one of our most respected ranchers. It's exactly the sort of happy occasion we need after such a hard winter." Word spread quickly, and by midday, Winifred had received well wishes from nearly every resident of St. Joe. Gabriel's sister Harriet rushed to the schoolhouse during the lunch hour, embracing Winifred with tears of joy. "I've prayed for years that Gabriel would find someone," she confided. "After the war, he was so closed off, so determined to be alone. You've brought him back to life, Winifred." The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations. Harriet helped Winifred sew a simple but elegant wedding dress of cream-colored cotton with delicate lace trim, ordered specially from Omaha. Gabriel, with help from neighbors, added a second bedroom to the ranch house and expanded the kitchen, preparing for their future together. By April, the prairie was beginning to show the first signs of spring. Tender green shoots emerged from the soil, and wildflowers dotted the landscape with bursts of color. The wedding was set for the last Saturday of the month, to be held in the small church in St. Joe with a celebration afterward on the town green. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, as if nature itself approved of the union. Winifred prepared in Harriet's home in town, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. "You look beautiful," Harriet said, adjusting the simple wreath of wildflowers in Winifred's upswept hair. "Gabriel won't be able to take his eyes off you." "I can hardly believe this is happening," Winifred confessed. 6 months ago, I was leaving Boston with nothing but hope and desperation. Now I'm marrying the most wonderful man I've ever known. Sometimes life has better plans for us than we have for ourselves," Harriet observed wisely. The church was filled to capacity when Winifred walked down the aisle on Mayor Holloway's arm, the older man having offered to stand in for her absent father. Gabriel waited at the altar, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awe as he caught sight of his bride. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. Winifred and Gabriel had written their own vows, promises of love and partnership that reflected their journey together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from the congregation nearly lifted the roof. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. The entire town turned out to wish the newlyweds well, bringing gifts and dishes for a communal feast. There was music and dancing, laughter and a few happy tears. As the sun began to set, Gabriel took Winifred's hand and led her away from the festivities toward where their horses waited. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Garrett?" he asked, his voice warm with love and promise. "Yes," Winifred replied, leaning into his embrace. "Home." They rode back to the ranch as twilight painted the prairie in shades of purple and gold. The house glowed with welcome in the distance, lamps lit earlier by neighbors to greet the newlyweds' return. Gabriel lifted Winifred from her saddle with reverent hands and carried her across the threshold of their home. Inside, someone had filled vases with wildflowers and left a bottle of wine with 2 glasses on the table. "Welcome home," Gabriel whispered, setting her gently on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "I still can't believe you're really my wife." Winifred reached up to touch his face, marveling at the love she saw reflected in his eyes. Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Their kiss was a promise, and a beginning the first of many in a life they would build together. 5 years later, Winifred stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as Gabriel taught their 4-year-old son James to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, clung to her skirts, eyes wide with fascination at her brother's adventure. "Careful now," Gabriel called, his hands steady on the pony's lead rope. "That's it, son. You're a natural horseman." Pride swelled in Winifred's heart as she observed her family. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, growing from Gabriel's modest beginning to one of the most successful operations in the county. She still taught at the school 3 days a week, having trained a young woman from Omaha to assist her after James was born. Life on the frontier remained challenging. Droughts, harsh winters, and occasional illness tested their resilience. But they faced each challenge together, their partnership only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. When Gabriel and James returned to the house, both flushed with excitement and success, Winifred greeted them with embraces and congratulations. "Did you see me, Mama?" James asked, bouncing with pride. "I rode all by myself." "I certainly did," Winifred assured him. "You're becoming quite the cowboy." Gabriel scooped up Elizabeth, who giggled in delight at her father's attention. "And this little lady will be riding before we know it," he predicted, tickling her until she squealed. That evening, after the children were tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Gabriel and Winifred sat together on the porch swing he had built the previous summer. The prairie stretched before them, bathed in moonlight and possibility. "Do you ever think about that day?" Gabriel asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "The day I found you in the snowstorm," Winifred leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Often, I was so lost, so afraid. I thank God every day that I decided to check the southern fence line that afternoon," Gabriel said softly. "If I'd gone north instead." "But you didn't," Winifred reminded him, squeezing his hand. "You found me. You wrapped me in your coat and brought me home." "Best decision I ever made," Gabriel murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. As stars appeared in the vast Nebraska sky, Winifred reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a mail-order bride abandoned in the snow to a beloved wife, mother, and teacher. What had begun as desperation had transformed into a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have imagined. "I love you, Gabriel Garrett," she whispered into the quiet night. His arms tightened around her, his voice a rumble of emotion against her ear. "And I love you, Winifred Garrett." Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. Together they watched the moon rise over the land they both now called home, their hearts as boundless as the prairie horizon.